Good morning. Buenos dias. I hope you are well, staying positive, and focused on what you can control. Welcome. Drop in the chat where you are tuning in from to this Cafecito con HACE. We encourage you to comment, to engage, and use this time to network with one another in the chat. My name is Patricia Mota, and I am the president and CEO of HACE, the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. Headquartered in Chicago is where I'm based, and a national nonprofit whose mission since 1982 is to positively impact workplaces by cultivating the pipeline of Latino talent, providing our community the insight, access, and support to be successful in their careers. A few key announcements. If you're looking for leadership development opportunities, please make sure to visit our website. We've got a few programs. Applications are getting ready to close very soon, such as our inaugural Hombres de HACE program, our multicultural leadership program. And if you're based in New York, our Mujeres de HACE, our Latina leadership program, is closing this Friday. If you're looking for your next career opportunity, we have our Diversity in Sports today taking place, so it's not too late to register, and then our virtual career fair in August 15th. So lots going on. You may have missed something, so please go to the website. I want to make sure we jump right in. We have a wonderful guest joining us today. Her name is Laura Wilhelm, and she is the Executive Director of Disability in Chicagoland. Laura, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Patricia. Thank you so much for having me.
We are thrilled to have you so that folks get to know who you are. And one of the things that I love about doing this Cafecito is we've got a diverse array of folks that get to join us. And it's always great to have folks like you to share your story and most importantly, how you got to your role today. So please share with us the first thing before we get to know more who you are, Laura. Our first question is, how do you like your coffee prepared or morning beverage of choice?
So usually I just like regular coffee with some milk in it. But in the summer, I've switched to iced coffee, still with milk. But when it's hot out, I kind of like the cold drink to start the day.
And it's been hot, not just in Chicago, but everywhere. We want to make sure we get those refreshing drinks to get us going in the morning. Everyone joining us today, we are, it's National Disability Independence Day. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more and Laura's great work that she's leading over at her organization. But before we do that, Laura, tell us how you got to where your role is today, your cultural, your professional background. I think it's important we have folks, again, different stages in their careers to hear your story.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Disability in Chicagoland. So one of the things that we try to do with our corporate partners is to model some disability inclusion best practices. And one of the things that, excuse me, is a good idea to do for folks who may have low vision or visual impairments, it's a good idea to do a visual description on a Zoom or a Teams or a video conference like this. So I'll give you a quick video description of myself. I am a middle-aged white woman. I have straight, sort of just past my hair, brown shoulder length brown hair. And I'm in my home office, which is in my living room. And I have a floral shirt on today. So that's who I am sort of physically. So professionally, I'm actually an attorney and a social worker. And I started my career by doing healthcare and disability advocacy. And specifically, the first job I had out of grad school was in helping families who had infants with a lot of complex medical conditions, and spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what sort of social issues, personal issues, what kind of legal issues were they dealing with now that they suddenly had to take care of an infant who had was in the hospital for long periods of time and may have disrupted their jobs and their home life. And that kind of led me into some more disability advocacy. And from there, I actually worked on developing a marketing campaign that was all about trying to get companies to see the value of disability employment, and that was called Think Beyond the Label. And then that led me to, I really got excited about the opportunity to work with companies around, anything around the conversations around disability. And so that led me to Disability in Chicagoland, which is the local affiliate of Disability In, our national partner. And we are a business to business network really focused on trying to help companies better integrate disability into their larger diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies.
Wonderful. So much to learn here. And I think, you gave a perfect example in terms of what employers, what organizations can do, right, to build more inclusive workplace. To date, there's data that shows that 1 in 4 Americans have some sort of disability. And yet, these are often one of the most overlooked groups when it comes to advocating for equal rights, and it deepens for women, mothers, people of color, that in this stage. So, what can employers do to build a more inclusive workspace?
So first of all, I would just thank you all for bringing the anniversary of the ADA to the topics that you're discussing with your partners, because I think it's great to have an opportunity to use these annual anniversaries, these disability specific dates throughout the year to kind of jump into some of these conversations and help build awareness. So today's actually the 33rd anniversary of the ADA, which really was a landmark civil rights law that protects the rights of Americans with disabilities. And while the ADA has absolutely created significant change, there's still a lot of work to do. And you just highlighted kind of some of the background for that. So really about 20% of Americans have a disability. Excuse me. And in the US, 61 million American adults have a disability. And about 30% of families will include someone with a disability. So I think it's just always helpful to kind of level these conversations in the context around the kind of the scale of the population that we're talking about. It really is it's a significant portion of the total population globally, but specifically in the US. The other thing I think is really helpful to point out is that there are a lot of economic reasons to focus on disability inclusion. And people with disabilities control about $21 billion in, discretionary income. So we're talking about a really big segment of the overall marketplace. And it's disability is sort of unique in that it is one of the diversity categories that any of us can become a part of at any point in time in our lives. And in fact, most of us are probably going to age into some type of disability. So I think, as I continue to work with companies around disability inclusion, one of the things that I'm always reminded about is that it's important to create spaces for conversations around what disability is, and really, why it's important to kind of have these conversations and engage. I think people's perspective on what disability is really very much based upon their own personal experience, which makes sense. But I think a lot of times that means that people don't understand the full kind of breadth of identities that can become a part of a disability identity. So we're talking about people with physical, mobility impairments, visual impairments, hearing impairments, but really the majority of disabilities are actually non-apparent. So it can be things like chronic illness, mental health. And so the more companies are engaging in education and awareness building around this, the easier it is for them to better understand who they already employ, who's within their existing workforce that fits into this category, but then also to create an environment where it's easier to do outreach and recruiting of candidates with disabilities. And because we're talking about 20% of the population, it's, this is certainly a segment of the population that you don't want to overlook in your talent acquisition and recruiting strategies.
Absolutely. And Laura, to your earlier point today, because of the American Disabilities Act that's being acknowledged today, we create awareness of it, but it's something that should be discussed, right, year round, and because it's so critical and all the data that you mentioned. Given that ASA being Latino serving, I think one of the biggest things that we're trying to do more is an intersectional approach with everything that we do. I know some of the data that I saw, like from Axios Latino, says about 10% of Latinos have been identified as having some sort of disability. And then, and to your point, not everything's visible. I think respectability.org listed some Latinos with disabilities like Salma Hayek, who has dyslexia, and folks like that are a little more, that are open about it, but not that everything that's seen. There's the seen and the unseen, right? So I think that's so critical. And the other thing too is I think the Pew Research Center just did a diversity research, and a part of it was on disability, where it was 50% or half of the workers that place great value in working somewhere that's accessible to those with physical disabilities. That's only 50%. I would have thought a little bit higher. So I think that there's a huge need to really push for this work. So those of you tuning in, if you have questions, have them ready, or if you have any comments or thoughts on what your companies are doing or your employers are doing to build a more disability inclusive workplace, please do share. We're happy to have Laura here, who, yes, we're here for a short time, but will be a resource to you because we'll be sharing her information with you all as well. So before we open it up for questions, tell us more about, Disability N. You said, is also a global organization thriving disability inclusion and equality in corporate America. Can you share about your role, the programs that your organization offers?
Absolutely. So Disability N nationally is it's a nonprofit serving the US, but now also really with a focus on global disability inclusion. And their priorities are really all about building disability inclusion into the workplace, the marketplace, and the supply chain. And so I think there are about 23 different affiliates at this point around the country, and we are the Chicago area affiliate. And our priorities are the same as Disability N nationally, but what we want to do is connect with companies that have a presence in Chicago, get a better understanding of where they are in their disability inclusion journey, and really meet our business partners where they are, and then create opportunities for them to access information and resources, and maybe most importantly, to build relationships with some of the other companies who are championing disability inclusion, and then more specifically, really with some of those internal disability inclusion champions within these. Mostly we're talking about large national and international organizations. And so we want to bring them together, get them to share information and resources. I think one of the things that's really nice about this space is there's an openness to collaboration. And what I hear from our business partners is that there's a real benefit for them in being at the table with, in particular, some of their competitors. So that once they hear what other organizations who they're competing for market share and talent with, once they understand what they're doing from a disability inclusion perspective, that enables them to take that information back to their organizations and really kind of change the way their organizations are thinking about this, because everybody wants to, be the best that they can within their industry and in supporting their employees. So what we try to do is offer monthly programs, which at this point we're back to kind of a mix of in-person and virtual programs. It's kind of a range of thought leadership events. We do trainings. We host panel conversations. We have networking events, and we really rely on our business partners to tell us the areas where they are looking for support, or maybe what are their greatest pain points around disability inclusion. And probably for this audience, it won't be surprising to hear that a lot of our corporate partners have a disability employee resource group or business resource group. And it's really helpful to network with other disability ERGs and BRGs to understand kind of how they're thinking about this, what programming they're doing. And then when we can help, try to create opportunities for them to collaborate in the programming that we're doing. The other thing that we do is we want to help build connections and relationships with some of the disability community organizations that we have. Chicago has an incredibly active and engaged disability community. So we want to help our business partners understand what those resources are and how to access them. And then the other thing that we want to do on a local level is build connections to Chicago area colleges and universities who have students with disabilities that sometimes I think are unintentionally getting filtered out of the either on-campus or online recruiting systems. And so we want to partner with the career services offices at these universities and create opportunities for our corporate partners and their diversity recruiters to identify these students and make sure they're getting into the pipeline.
That's a great work that you just mentioned that's being done, Laura. Our connector here, our colleague that introduced you to us, has a question on how can one help bring disability more into the conversation when one advocates for DEI?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it's something that probably, the folks participating today are probably already good at, even if they're not consciously aware that they're doing it. So I think a big piece of where there are opportunities just goes back to this idea of education and awareness building. And I think disability really does intersect with every other identity and all of the other diversity categories. And so creating spaces to talk about really this broader question of what disability is, the idea of apparent and non-apparent disabilities, and then learning. There's all sorts of best practices that you can use, particularly at companies. Like I mentioned, visual descriptions is a really good one. Another thing to do in your webinars and anytime you're doing video conferences is to include captioning, which it's one of those things which it's an accessibility tool that's designed for individuals who may have hearing impairments, but it's actually better for everybody. I find myself sometimes on a Zoom or a video conference, and while I'm very well intentioned, I get distracted and I'm multitasking. And if the captions are there, I can catch up, and once you get to the end of the meeting, you actually have a transcript of the meeting too, which is really helpful if you have to come up with notes and follow up. So it's things like that. There are some best practices that you can sort of gradually start to integrate into how you're engaging with an audience. And then that creates opportunities for conversation too, talking about why did you do that? Why do you have captions? Why did you describe what you look like? So I think the more we can create opportunities for those things, the more we're building awareness, and the more we're kind of acknowledging that disability is just a very natural piece of the human experience, and it's a piece of a large segment of our population's identity.
Yeah, love that. Lots of great tips. Would love to, make sure that we share your information so that folks that want more information or would love to get involved, we can do that. I see some opportunities for us to even collaborate as an organization, all the partners that we work with. So I'm thrilled to continue this partnership. And so we will share Laura's, she's been gracious enough to share her email. And then of course you can continue to drop any questions that you may have in the chat. But as we wrap up, Laura, what are you hopeful for, or a positive story that gives you hope for this year?
Yeah, so I truly do believe that this is a space where there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. And I think, for all of the challenges that the pandemic created, it also created some more awareness around diversity conversations generally, but also disability in particular. I think people have a better sort of appreciation for chronic illness after the pandemic. People also are more aware of mental health. And I think companies are starting to engage in conversations around mental health, which has been really, stigmatized over a long period of time. So I feel like that's, I can see that there's more openness to these conversations. And I think that's really exciting. The other thing that I think is a real benefit is that a lot of, so several different pieces of the disability community have long asked for different types of accommodations in the workforce, and one common request was to have virtual work or remote work. And the pandemic, that a lot of times that was a very difficult request, but the pandemic changed that quickly. And so the ability for workers with disabilities to work remotely and show how productive they can be and how much value that they're adding, even without going into the office. And I think the other place, kind of in this broader conversation around accessibility, where we're making progress is just in companies really looking at not only the physical accessibility of their workspaces, but their online presence and their digital accessibility. So their websites, the communications tools they're using, all of those things. So I really do feel like we're at a point in time where this we're making some progress, and this conversation is happening in a lot more spaces than it used to be.
Wonderful. Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. I'm sure everybody's walking away with some key nuggets or some additional awareness that we didn't have from before this chat. We'll be sure to share Laura's contact information in the chat, and you can also reach out to her on LinkedIn as well. Everyone joining us, continue to engage, and we'll see you next time. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Bye-bye.